everyone. First off, thank you to all of you for joining us tonight for our CV Mastery Workshop, which is a workshop organized by the Human Resource Circle of NSBM Green University under the guidance of our Department of Management. So on behalf of the HR Circle, I would like to welcome all of you to our resume building session, where you will learn how to develop a standout CV. And to guide us through today's session, we have here with us today Mr. Aishan Bamunavita, who is the Manager of Talent Acquisition and Development at Millennium IT ESP, and he works under the HR arm of his company. So he's a very well experienced person in spotting top talent in the corporate sector, and he will be sharing his expertise and insights with us today on developing a standout CV. So without further ado, I would like to hand over the session to Mr. Aisha.
Can you all hear me now? Hello.
Yes, we can hear you. Yeah.
Amazing, amazing. Right. So thank you so much for having me here today, Hirunima and also Heshan. Wonderful to, once again be a part of a session organized by NSBM. It's been quite some time, and I think I have a great history of, working together with NSBM for the longest of time. So either way, I think it has been a long day for you. I believe you're all after lectures, is that right, Heshan and Hirunima?
Yes, that's right.
Is it? I see. I see. Right. No worries. So I will keep it concise. I will keep it short to ensure that, I preserve both your interests and I also do the best for you. So without any further ado, let's get it going. I'm sharing my screen. Do you see it by chance?
Yeah, it's visible.
Yes. Okay, amazing. So once again, I'm here today to speak with you regarding CV mastery, right? And I believe the requirement is as such where I give you a comprehensive understanding as to how to draft a CV and what possibilities you can unleash, by doing your CV right. So just before we get started, I believe Hirima did a wonderful job of introducing myself. But just to give you a recap, basically, as said, I hit the talent acquisition and talent development, both arms for Millennium IT ESP, right? And so far, throughout my career, I've connected more than 800 plus engineers with jobs, both in Sri Lanka and outside of Sri Lanka as well. And, I maintain, healthy following base on LinkedIn, right? And I've been doing this for quite some time in terms of talent acquisition, and it happens to be a weird journey altogether because I started off as a finance graduate. So I myself studied at NSBM back in the day at the inception. This was when NSBM just came into Pitipana. Right, so this when I was studying with NSBM, and I happened to graduate as a finance graduate. And but then again, my life took a different turn, right? I went from that to talent acquisition, and here I am doing this today. And all this said and done, I've been working for some renowned brands, both in Sri Lanka as well as overseas, both in the Nordic region and, in Brazil and, in the other side of the world, like Malaysia, Thailand, Philippines, etc. So it has been a long journey. And also to keep myself occupied, I always ensure, I keep, doing something else. So if you have been to Kai Beach, quite recently, it's down Wellingham. So it's basically an initiative that I supported my friend with, right? And also, I am an investor of another business that is into retail flowers, right? So that's basically about me. I like to do cycling, announcing, comparing, if you might want to call it, and etc. So that's a little bit about me, right? Amazing. So to get started, I believe it's always best to, start off with quotation so that we start on a good note. Right. So Stanley Randall happened to be one of the very well-known figures in terms of, departing his knowledge to, the world as well. And with this, he happened to once say that, the closest to perfection a person ever comes is when he or she, of course, fills out a job application, right? And this is because, my friends, any person, right, would never want to portray themselves as a subpar or, a person who's not qualified for the job. right? Everyone would always like their CV to be perceived in a way where they come out as the best fit for the role. So this is what Stanley happened to say, in this language where he says, everyone tries to portray themselves as a perfect person in a CV, of course. Right. So if you have any questions by any chance, feel free to ask me, right? Contacted Heshan as well. So if there's anything, you can talk to me afterwards, or you can send it across to him. And I believe we should be able to cover the questions that you might be having. Right. So, my friends, I would like some interaction as well, if that is okay. Right. So, what is a resume or a CV? Right. So, I know that you see what's on the screen, but anyone wants to give their own input as to what a resume or CV is from what you think it is? What's your perspective on what a resume or CV is? Any answers? No? Okay, I'll get it going. So, in terms of a resume or CV, right, as to how I believe it is, right, it's basically the first representation of you towards a company or even an entity, right? So an entity could either be an academic body, just like your university, or it can be any sort of company for that matter. An entity will always be, another institution which can, probably recruit you for any opening that there is available. So when it comes to a resume or CV, once again, right, it is basically your first image, right? That's always because you don't ever show up with your CV, or you don't ever show up in person at the first time when you are approaching a recruiter who might be recruiting for that particular role. It's always you sending this document across, right? Them getting a good impression of you by that document that they see about you, and then they call you for an interview, right? So in my terms, a resume or CV is the first representative and dialogue between you and your entity of choice, right? And then we come to, quite, a challenging or, quite debated thing as well. It's where, what is the difference between a resume and a CV? Once again, there's a difference between a resume and a CV, right? We quite often try to use these interchangeably, where, we either say it as resume or a CV. But a resume, right, happens to be more or less a comprehensive and short version of a CV, right? And this is because, usually a resume, right, is directed towards, right, one particular destination. So to put it in other terms, if you are eyeing for a specific job and you take your CV and you cut down, add things and etc. to particularly suit that job itself, right, it's called a resume, right? And it's about 2 pages maximum long, nothing much at all. But just know, once again, that resume is 100% suited towards a particular job you are aiming for, right? But then when it comes to a CV, of course, right? CV is quite a different approach. It's where you record everything to do about you. So everything in your career, where you have worked, all the skills you have gained, your academics, any publishing you have done, etc., etc. It focuses on everything about you that you can present to a company. So a CV is basically not aimed towards a particular entity, but rather like a history document about you. So it consists of everything that there is to know about you, and this might go up to about 3 pages at the most. But I've seen, certain CVs go up to 4 or 5 pages, but I wouldn't advise, right? But this is basically the difference between a resume and a CV. I hope that's clear to you, my friends, right? So once again, if there are any questions, please hold on to it, or you can pass it to the organizing committee. They can do justice for you. Right. So why is the CV important in this modern age? I think that this is very important that we speak about this, my friends. And is especially because now you know what a CV is. And before we get to what we need to fine tune to better do a CV, we definitely need to know why a CV is important, right? The first point that I put across, slow market with limited job opportunities. I believe this is very, very apparent right now in the industry, where you see that markets are extremely slow. You find more and more and more companies not recruiting, or they are on hiring freeze, right? And this is directly related to a lot of factors, but really now we see a lot of geopolitical effects coming into play. So this can be where, there are tensions between regions escalating, right? And because of that, companies are, taking a backwards approach where they're trying to save their money and not spend outrageously as well. And with this, they are creating job markets in a way where, they are just recruiting the most essential people to work with, especially because of, geopolitical reasons, right? Number two, why is it so hard to find a job? It's especially because, there's a lot of talent out there in the market, right? Now, when I studied at NSBM back in the day, it was a very, very limited batch. I don't think we had we didn't have numbers in multiples, right? So it was a very, very handful amount of people that, studied at NSBM. And even, in other universities, it was not the case. But now we see more and more and more and more people studying especially subjects like IT, right? So because I come from an IT company, it's very, very apparent that that is the case. That even if you speak to an O-level student or A-level student or someone who's at university, there's more and more and more demand for technology-related degrees. And because of that, there's a lot of talent out there, right? So there's too much talent, right? And, less jobs. So these why a CV is also important. Number three, global competition. So you might be knowing friends who are probably, working from Sri Lanka for different entities. Maybe it's a company in Singapore. Maybe it's a company in Sweden. Maybe it's a company in Norway. They will be working for these entities just by staying in Sri Lanka at the comfort of their home, right? And this is the reason why, once again, it's so hard to find jobs, because now it's not a local or, saturated, what do you call, sorry, I'm so sorry, segmented market, right? This is because, now the entire world is just one market, right? So if I really want, if I can't find a person for this technology here at Millennium IDSP, I can easily find someone from Singapore, I can easily find someone from Vietnam, etc., and get them to work for us. So it's just not the local talent that's competing now, it's the entire world competing for jobs, right? Then, of course, we come to, market shifts in job types, AI, technology, things have changed drastically, right? We have seen how, technology is, wiping out certain jobs and certain roles and, certain categories or even industries as a whole, right? Now, for example, let's say if you take AI, you can write code with it. So if you want to write some simple code and do a website, right? Take this with a grain of salt, but then again, you can quite honestly, give the commands on, these AI platforms, and you can get the code done and you can get something down out of it. So with this, you require less and less and less talent to come and do these monotonous jobs, whereas, you can get technology to run these through. So this is once again a real reason why, it's very hard to secure a job, right? And then companies lean towards efficiency and accommodate limited roles, right? Now, let me give you this example, my friends. Now, when it comes to, companies that's operating in the Nordics, especially, in Sweden, in Norway, to etc., Germany, and all these countries, usually, right, they do not hold the entire team with them in their country because it's very, very expensive. So they decentralize these, to markets which are cheaper, like in Sri Lanka, like in Bangladesh, and India, to so on. So with this, once again, right, especially in the developed countries, if you were to look at this from the perspective of developing country, developed countries now offer less and less skilled jobs because they outsource that into different countries, which is way, way low in cost to do, right? Then, of course, lean budgets, right? This is also because, now companies are bracing for, impact in the future, because you never know what it is. COVID was quite unexpected. It came along, did drastic changes in the market, how we operate, how even institutes, even education institutes operate. Back then, Zoom, Teams was never a thing, you always had to be present in person to all that. And now it's different. So now companies are also leaning towards, lean methodologies of working, where, they are trying to optimize costs. They are trying to make the best use of, the resources that's available. So with that, we see, a challenging move to get jobs. Then, lastly, my friends, I think changes in barriers to entry in the job market. Once again, why we have so many contenders going for limited jobs is because now the ecosystem is very different. Back then, in our day, you got to do your O levels, you got to do your A levels, and then you got to do a degree to even start or approach a job. Whereas now you can do your O levels. I believe NSBM also offers this, where you can do your O levels, then do a foundation course and fast track. So fast tracking means that there'll be more and more and more people available in the job market in a short duration, right? So with all this, you need more and more, emphasis on, things like a CV to really showcase that you are the cut for the job, right? Any questions, my friends? If you have any questions, you can ask me right now, if that's okay, or you can wait for later as well, right? I hope this is clear to you. So let's get it going, right? Amazing. Right. So my friends, in terms of, a CV, right, there are two ways of how we look at it. One is what you, as my friends, as you as the candidate control, and we digest from your CV. Number one, when it comes to you, right, you take ownership and you have control over the content that you put. So whether to put A, B, C, D is up to you. No one would say not to put A, not to put B, not to put C. It's always you who has control over your own CV. That's number one. Number two, applied knowledge, right? Let me give you this example. So this example is from the late 1990s, right? This was when one of the prominent universities in Sri Lanka, right, a state university, was setting up their computer lab, right? So they were setting up their computer lab. They newly got a space allocated by the government. So they, got the space arranged and, they got the systems supplied to the university. And then the lecturers and academics basically got together and asked students to come and help set up the computer lab. And if you know anything about how computers work and how networking works, there are different topologies of how you set up networks. So it can be a ring, it can be a bus, it can be a star network, depending on how you connect all these computers with the servers. And basically that request was made, right? And apparently the front benchers, people who sit right at the front, the studious persons did not come forward to do this thinking that their studies will be affected. Rather, the people who were sitting at the back of the class, right, opted to go and help out, right, and set up the computer lab, which they did. It was a success, things were ongoing. And then happened to be a career fair. So at this career fair, basically back in the day, there were only about three IT companies which were very prominent back in the 90s, right? And one of those companies basically went for that career fair and they interviewed persons. And when the results came about, it was all the people who were sitting at the back who got all the jobs and not the people sitting at the front. So this was quite a dilemma for, all the persons there, right? And they were thinking to themselves as to what's going on. People who really studied, who got first class up, first class, second class, uppers, etc., did not secure the jobs. Rather, persons sitting at the back got the jobs. And their response was basically the person sitting at the back, even though their knowledge was limited, they really knew how to apply their knowledge because they have gone and set up this particular computer lab. Whereas for that company's person sitting at the front, just knowing the theory was not good enough. So this is why, my friends, I say that applied knowledge is very important. As much as you learn, you become that A class student. It's also important that you put into practice what you learn, right? So this is very, very, very important, my friends. Then comes to the segment where what we digest as companies. One, we definitely look at academic excellence. So we don't always want the best of the best, the batch top or the second top or the third. We want people who have enough and sound knowledge about what they have learned. So we don't want persons right at the top. We don't want persons right at the bottom. We want people who just know their stuff enough just to get things done. So that's what we mean by academic excellence. Then, of course, we come to emotional intelligence, right? Emotional intelligence, basically is quite a different subject, right? But I'll get into a segment of it of what we look into personally. It's where we look at if students, now this is very important, especially when you are applying for internships, when you are applying for your first job outside of the university, it's where we look at whether you have been done any sports, you have been part of any societies, clubs, to etc. Because we want persons who can work with other people. right? We don't want persons who will, just sit alone and do work, because we want synergy. We really want persons to come through, sit together, collaborate, brainstorm and come up with solutions. So this is what we mean as emotional intelligence, where we want people to come and collaborate and talk to each other and be friendly with each other. Because we as large companies, MIT has about 700 plus employees. With this, we do not want to be solving problems, rather we want to see how companies drive towards outcomes, right? So this is what we mean by emotional intelligence. So I believe it's very clear to you as to what the two segments are, what you control and what we digest from your CVs. So I hope that's clear enough for you, right? So let's move on to the next. Right, my friends. So just before we get started, right, about CV writing, now we are getting into the very core of what we need to discuss today. This is basically the structure that we need to follow when we are doing a CV write. Okay. So you can take a snapshot of this if you really want, so that when you're building your CV, right, you can basically tick this off and ensure that you use this as a checklist to ensure that you really have put your CV together, right? Okay. So you can just go through this. Just give me a second as well, right? So let me just grab some water. 1 second, please. Right. I believe that is okay, right? I hope you all have taken screenshot. We'll just go through it, one by one. Right. So when it comes to the full name, right? We are Sri Lankans, I think, are accustomed to, having a lot of names, right? You have about 4 names at the front, then you have your first name, which you call it as a first name. Then you have the middle name, and then you have more names to proceed with, right? So I think it comes with our culture, it comes from our backgrounds where, we have multiple names. So when it comes to the name, my friends, is especially important, right? That you only put 3 names at the most. But one is basically your calling name, the name that anyone usually uses, to address you. Number two, any middle name if you really want to include, and definitely we'd like to see your surname or the family name, right? So at the most, use 3 names, right? And then number two, right? Always ensure that you either bold or underline the calling name. Now, for example, if you were to look at this particular example that is there on screen, right? You can see that Don Fernando, Kumar, Galege, etc. We have just cut it out because what we say is that do not put all the names that. So Nisanka happens to be basically his calling name. So because of that, Nisanka is underlined here in this example. And then Anuruddha and Pereira, right? So that's basically first, the second name or the middle name and the surname, right? I hope that's clear to you. So in terms of the name, this is what you really need to do. And a disclaimer, my friends, so everything that you see marked with an asterisk in yellow is basically things you really need to keep in mind, especially when you are approaching your first job as an intern or as a fresh graduate, right? So we'll go through others as well, but then again, that's for later in life, especially when you start working for companies and go on from there. But once in asterisks are basically things you really need to emphasize when you are applying for first job as an intern or a fresh graduate, right? So second point, right? The photo. I think when it comes to the photo, of course, there are different photos that persons use, right? And this happens to be with, different technologies and platforms that we have as well, from Instagram to Facebook to Snapchat to TikTok or X for the matter, which was formerly known as Twitter, right? With all that, right? Basically, there are a lot of versions of pictures that you come with, right? What we say, friends, is basically to always use a picture that is corporate friendly, right? So as you might see, right, in these sample pictures that you see on screen, the first 4 pictures are definitely not things that we, would appreciate as companies, right? We would appreciate to see, one of the two at the tail end, right? The last two pictures you see of this lady and this gentleman as well, these are things that we would like to see. But anything as the four pictures, right, at the very forefront is not what we would appreciate to see. The number two, right? Always place your picture in the corner of a CV, right? Do not try to make it the instance where they have taken the watermark as their picture. This is not something. And picture, right, at the very last page. The best practice is always to put it right on the first page of your CV. So please stick to it and ensure that your picture is decent enough so that it can be represented in a corporate setting, right? Right. So, right now, when it comes to contact details, very interesting. When we as recruiters, right now, my team as well, when they especially call candidates, right, there are instances where they have sometimes put someone else's number. It can be the mother's number, the father's number, the boyfriend's number, the girlfriend's number, or anyone for them matter, either, not themselves, right? So we have come across instances where, we speak to the candidate, especially because we want to speak to either him or her, for else who's answering and who promises to convey the message to the candidate. And in instance like that, especially in a market where, now jobs are less and less and less, right? Companies would not want to tolerate, of waiting for you to call back once again and, for you to come back to us, etc. So it's very crucial that you put your own number in your CV so that when companies call you or even, any entity for that matter calls you, that they reach you directly and not anyone else. That's number one. Number two, we have many network providers in Sri Lanka, right? Ranging from the largest to the smallest. I think we have about 6 types of networks here in Sri Lanka, telecommunication networks. And some people tend to have, especially I've seen this with university students, they have a number from every network provider, right? Be it from Dialog, be it from any other company, from Mobitel to Hutch to etc. Be it anything, they have one from every network provider, right? And the thing is, right, even if that is the case, in a CV, just put the two at the most that you definitely use. Because sometimes you have about 6 numbers, we call all 6 numbers, nothing is working, right? So it's very, very important that you put the numbers that we can definitely reach you at, and that too only a maximum of 2 numbers, right? Then, of course, my friends, when it comes to the country code, right? This is important because if you are applying for a job that is outside of the country, it's very crucial that you put the country code because if not, they would not know what to use. So in Sri Lanka, it's 0094. If you want to write that down, it can either be +94 or 0094. This is very important when you are applying overseas for any jobs. Then, my friends, LinkedIn, I am not so sure if we have covered a session with LinkedIn for you. I'm not sure if I have done that. I've done several sessions on LinkedIn for NSBM in the past, so I'm not sure if you have sat through that. But if any other company has done that, that's great as well. If not, we can look at the possibility of doing that in the future as well. LinkedIn is a crucial, crucial platform for you to be on to find a job. Because, my friends, apart from the first job that I took up in my career, every other preceding role came to me on LinkedIn, right? So I worked in multiple IT companies throughout in my career. Only the first job I applied for. All the other jobs they are on were where persons from those respective companies spoke to me and told me about this opportunity, and I took those up. So even me coming to Millennium IDSP was as means of that, right? So it's very, very, very important that LinkedIn profile is done and it's done in a proper manner, right? Then, of course, we come to the next, my friends. it's where you include your address, right? So most of students from universities ask me this question about whether they should include the address. And in my personal opinion, I do not think that you really need to include your address. And this is especially because in this modern day and time, where data privacy is a real concern, right? You do not know where your CV is going, especially if you're applying for a large company. Your data is very, very secure because, we maintain ISO standards. We ensure that we are compliant with, different standards across the world, like GDPR and etc. But if you are applying for a small company, a small scale company, right? There is a high tendency where you might apply for or to a place, sorry, and then your CV might, be passed down to several persons, or it might go on to another set of hands. You never know. So unless otherwise, you want, people to be standing outside your door one day without anything, it's better to not include your specific address. So how can I explain this to you? If you live in house 101 upon 5, let's say Malaby Road, Malaby, or something as such, do not put your house number. So what exact house you live in, it's not required. So if you come from Anuradhapura, Sri Lanka, just put Anuradhapura, Sri Lanka, because that's good enough information for a local entity or even an overseas entity to know that you come from Sri Lanka, you come from this town. That alone, my friends, is very much enough. But apart from that, going to the lane you live, the house you live to, etc., is not something that we would recommend for you to put. Date of birth and nationality, right? Now, date of birth and nationality are basically, once again, sensitive matters. We do not recommend persons to put this because, this sort of information does not make any sense whatsoever, provided that you are in the legal age of work, right? So as you might know, we have a legal age of work in Sri Lanka. If you are under a specific age, you cannot work. So it's very important that, you be of legal age to work, right? And if you are within that, basically there's no other reason why you need to put that, because, more and more companies are now, ensuring that there's no discrimination in the way they hire, in the way, the companies operate, to etc. So religion, when you were born, to etc., are things that should not matter to a company. So given that the company is world class and, they are very accommodative and, they are not biased by any means, right? These are information you need not put in your CV. Then, my friends, we come to email addresses. Very, very interesting once again. I've come across instances where certain individuals still happen to use the email addresses that they used as kids, right? So I think all of us are, more or less, basically victim, to having created different sorts of email addresses when we were small, right? Some funky ones, some cool ones, some which made you look good, to etc. But you need to know, after you grow up, you come to a certain age, that these email addresses are not going to be relevant, especially when you're applying for a job. So, examples that you see here: Father's Angel 2002, hottest guy alive, right? These are examples, that we have used here. But what we want to tell you is basically, do not use any email addresses as such, and kindly refrain from, using things as such. So once again, my friends, this is very important. This entire section is very important, especially when you are applying for your first job, right? Then we come to the summary, right? If you by chance have seen anyone's CV, or you have done it yourself and you too have made this mistake, many of the persons happen to put this line in their CV saying that my purpose is to support the vision and the mission of the organization, right? And the thing is, these are all just space figures, isn't it? Because when you are not in that company, right, there's a big, big, big tendency that you definitely do not even know, right, what that company's mission or vision is to start with, right? So just don't put things just to fill up space in your CV, right? Rather put something which is more relevant. So as you might see in the summary section that I'm speaking of right now, the second example are things that we definitely recommend, students to put in their CV. So as you might see, using nearly the same amount of space, we have put about 7 types of information in that opening para, right? It says that you are definitely of this years old. If you want to include that, you are a graduate of this, doing a degree in this field, where you're doing it from, the entity that you're following your degree from, whether you have an internship experience, what sort of technologies and tools you're good with, and also what sort of role you're looking for, right? So with that same amount of space, you have covered so much of information that this information really makes sense to the company, right? So this is something you have to bear in mind, my friends. Okay. Right. Then we come to work experience. I'm not going to dwell on this too much, because you are just getting into it, right? And, it's going to be your first job, I believe, for most of you. So with that, I'm not going to get into work experience in too detail, but I'll tell you what to do, right? One, when you are putting your work experience, always put in the work that you did, not anyone else. Always explain the role that you did. So if you happen to do this X job, explain what you did as your job, your role, your responsibilities, and your placement in the team. Whether you were an intern, whether you were a software engineer, whether you were a senior software engineer, what role did you do on a day to day? What significant achievements did you have? And if you are coming from a tech background, what sort of technologies or tools did you use to do in that job, right? And then definitely you need to include the duration of the stint, right? Whether you did for years or months or for decades, you need to include that. When you started, when you stopped, and if you have not stopped, you can always put it as present, right? So that we know that you are still on with that job. And then when you advance in your career throughout, my friends, right? You'll be working, you might have worked for 5, 6 companies by that time when you are old as well. So with that, always ensure that your recent experience is always on the top. So for example, let's say I worked for 5 companies before, and the last company that I worked for, or even the present company, let's say the present company, then the present company that I work for right now should be at the top in terms of your work experience. Then the last place that I worked for before coming into this role would be the second, and the third, to etc. So the first job that I worked in my career should always be the last in the work experience category, right? This is very important, my friends. Then we come to academic and professional qualifications, right? And also micro credentials. I have had many persons ask me as to what micro credentials are, right? And micro credentials, my friends, happen to be, the badges that you get by doing courses on either Udemy or Coursera or LinkedIn Learning. Any badges that you get, and then you include that in your CV or even in your LinkedIn profile are known as micro credentials. Okay. So coming back to track, in terms of, academic and professional qualifications, always when you're mentioning your degree, right, in your CV, always ensure you put in what sort of degree did you do? Was it a Bachelor of Science? Was it a Bachelor of Arts? Was it a BCom, a Bachelor of Commerce? Always include what sort of degree it is, and also the field it was into. Maybe it was into software engineering, maybe it was into, tourism, maybe it was into, business management, accounting and finance, etc. Please include that. Number 3, include which institute you did that degree from. So for example, for y'all, it could be National School of Business Management. Then it can be, either the affiliate degree from Plymouth or from, I believe you all have several other universities as well. So any affiliate, please mention that as well. Then number 4, always include your GPA. I believe, certain universities have GPS, certain universities do not provide GPS. Depending on, what it is, whether you are just given the class or the GPA is available, always ensure that you put that as well in your CV so that companies can identify you easily as whether, you were a first class or whether you second upper to etc. Right? So always include that. Then you need to always put the year that you graduated, right? And why this is especially important is not now, but for the future. Because let's say 10 years down the line, let's say someone joined Millennium ITSP as an intern and happened to be here for 10 years, right? And then comes along, you know, a person who worked for another company, right? And then who comes here to MITSP, and let's say that A and B happen to be, batchmates of that particular university back in the day. So let's say the person who has stayed here for 10 years gets paid 15 rupees, just an example, right? Let's say he or she is just paid 15 rupees. And let's say the person who's coming from out, right, is being offered 15 rupees, right? Now, we as the company, just because you have been here for 10 years, we would not remember each and every person's year of graduation when they joined to etc. We would not remember. Let's say so you have been here for 10 years. Once again, you're paid 15. Someone comes from out who happens to be a batchmate and we pay him or her 20. Then suddenly you feel like you have been here for so long, you have been such a loyal employee and you're being underpaid, right? And this is why this happens in a lot of companies, my friends. This is because, persons do not include which year they completed their degree in their CV or even in their HRIS when they join a company. When you include that piece of information, most mature companies always ensure that, persons coming from a specific, batch for that matter is more or less always compensated around the same range. So for example, let's say if the person coming from out is at 15, or sorry, at 20, and the person who's intern is at 15, and if we feel like, look here, this person outside is getting paid way more and we need to adjust this, we might adjust the internal person's salary as well to that level to ensure there's parity, right? So that's why I said it's not important for now, but this will be important for you in the future. So always include the year of graduation in your CV, right? Then, my friends, O level and A level subjects and the grades and when you did it is especially important when you are applying for your first job, right? Because when you apply for your first job, you might understand that companies will hire you for your personality and your attitude, right? Because when the company is hiring you as a first timer, they have nothing much to gauge you in terms of experience or in terms of practical exposure to work. So what will always happen is basically they'll look at the limited information that you have and then try to make a good call or judgment on that. So it's very important that you include your O level and A level subjects, especially when you're starting out in your career, so that companies have that information at their disposal. But later on, let's say when you have been working for the past 5 years, the 10 years, 15 years, etc., this becomes less irrelevant. So, 5 years down the line, after you have started working in a company, you can definitely discard your O level and A level results from your CV, right? It might not be that important as to when you were starting off, right? Then we, of course, some persons ask us whether it's okay to include the school, some want to, some generally do not want to. That's a choice that we leave up to you. Whether you include your CV, sorry, school or not, is a choice that I'll leave it up to you, right? Include online courses, workshops, or industry-specific certifications. Now, when it comes to qualifications, I believe there are a lot of qualifications out there. So, for example, in finance, you have ACCA, you have SEMA, you have CA, you have a lot of things. So if you have done anything as such, and even for marketing, I think Slim is there. If you are doing anything as such, always include those in your CV under, professional qualifications. All right. I hope y'all are with me, right? It's a lot of information as well, so bear with me. So if there are any questions, once again, feel free to keep that with you and, pass it on to your committee. If not, you can ask me then and there. I don't mind either, right? So please feel free to keep questions ready. Yes, so then we move on to the other part, which is other involvements. So let's say you have done something significant. Let's say whilst you are part of your university, right, you organize an employer branding session, for the other kids, at uni. So when it comes to other involvements, what we always mention is to include this sort of information in three subsects, right? One is basic the area. What topic did you touch upon? So for in this example, it says employer branding. So the area that was touched upon is employer branding. What is the initiative, right? Basically, for you to say that you did something for employer branding, what did you do? So in this example, once again, awareness on agile for 200, sorry, awareness on agile for university students. So that's what you did. Then comes on to the next question. What's the impact you made, my friends? Right? Conduct a session for 200 undergraduates, right? So you might see rather than just you putting in your CV that you did or organize the session for employer branding, in this way, you make it more and more relevant, right? Area is employer branding, the initiative is so that you did something on agile, and the impact is that you got this exposure to 200 students, right? So this is very important, my friends. Right. Then we come on to some other information as well, which is important, especially when you are still learning and you are part of uni, right? And this happens to be academic projects and research, right? Academic projects, right, are basically your dissertations, or it can be, your research that you do to etc. These are very important to include, especially, when you are applying for an internship or a fresh graduate role, right? Persons of companies recruiting might want to see what your final year project was for that matter. So all is include what sort of project you did, right? What were your findings, right? And apart from that, what was the example that you took into play? What was the correlation you found? What were the dependent variables? What were the independent variables? I fully trust that you have to do a final year project as well, using SPS and etc. So anything to all that. So always put a small. Also, if you are very much into academics, even right now or later on in your career, if you have any published papers that you have done, always make sure to include those as well, so that it can give you the best returns when you are doing your CV and applying for a company. Awards and recognitions, right? Any significant achievements. Let's say you were the gold medalist in your batch. Maybe you were the most outstanding student. Maybe you did some sports and you got colors. Any awards and recognitions, please, please, please include that, because as said, we always want to see all rounders and not just persons who just do studies, right? So this is very important, my friends. Then sports and extracurricular activities, right? Some companies, right, tend to hire persons, especially because of sports abilities. This we have seen, especially in large PLCs in Sri Lanka. There are ample amount of persons who are given jobs just because they excel in a sport, right? It could be badminton, it can be swimming, it can be basketball, it can be hockey, it can be anything under the sun, right? So please include all the sports you do in your university, or if you have done in school, always include that. And any significant achievements like you having captain in your school, or you having represented the country in a global setting, right? Please include things like that, because this will give you an edge. Then we come to technical skills and languages, right? I've come across students, right, who happen to say when I ask about Excel, right, they are a 3 out of 5, right? Some come to me and tell me, look here, my English, right, is a 4 out of 5. And if you are coming from, the tech space as well, they'll say in .NET, I'm a 3 out of 5, PHP, I'm a 2 out of 5. And the question I always ask my fellow friends is basically, how do you rate your own self, right? That is very, very similar. Sorry, it's very, very similar to you marking your own test paper, right? Sometimes you do not know what you don't know, right? Do I make sense? I hope I make sense. Sometimes you do not know what you don't know. So I sometimes ask persons like, look here, now you say you're a 4 out of 5 in Excel. Tell me about the diff function, or tell me about a VLOOKUP or HLOOKUP, or tell me about the pivots, right? And they're clueless and they do not even know what that is about. And they sometimes tend to think that, Excel is just about the sum and the, counts and etc. and, sum ifs and all that, which is not. So it's always important to never rate your own self because it's very, very similar to you marking your own test paper, right? Rather, just list down things you're good at. So if it's Excel, if it's Photoshop, if it's CorelDRAW, if it's photography, be it anything under the sun, any skill for that matter, just list it in bullet form, but never rate it as, on a Likert scale or any other rating scheme. Okay. And when it comes to the languages that you speak, right? Be it English, be it Sinhala, be it Tamil, be it Spanish, French, German, anything for that matter, always ensure that you put in your proficiency as well. Whether you just speak the language or whether you can read it, whether you can write it, whether you are a star at that language. Always include your proficiency in that language, especially when you're including that in your CV, because this will lend you a lending hand when you are applying for a job overseas, right? Then, my friends, we come to references, right? We come across instances where sometimes the entire batch of university is going for internships, and in every CV it happens to be the same lecturer who's there as the referee, right? And sometimes it is as such where in large batches where there are about 200, 300, 500 students for that matter, it's the same lecturer, and sometimes we call the lecturer to get a reference about that person or individual. They do not know anything about that individual whatsoever. It could either be the fact that, they were in class, but they are the quiet type, so your lecturer never got to know you. Number two, you never came to class, right? Your signature was always put in by your friends, but you never came to class. Or it could be a fact where, just because your friends have put the same person as the referee, you also just happen to put the same, right? And that is a bad remark because we usually call the referee to get a reference about how you work and how well you work, right? And when we call and they are clueless about you, it's not going to look nice, my friends, right? So it's very, very important, number one, that your referees know that they are being included in your CV as referees, and number two, you keep them informed, right, to also pick up or respond when we send across reference checks as well. And then number three, my friends, always just include the email address, of the referee. But when it comes to phone numbers, certain referees do not like their phone number being passed around. So always leave that up to discretion. So for example, just let the persons know who are looking at your CV that here's your referees, these are their email addresses. But if you require their phone numbers, right, for them to come across to you and get that on request, right? So it's very important to follow these as well. Right. So I think we have gone through each thing one by one, my friends. So we are at the very tail end. So I believe we are closing in pretty soon. So we have covered each and every aspect of the CV. So given that you have done all this very, very well, you should be sorted, right? But let's just keep to some housekeeping notes, right? One, always keep to 2 to 3 pages in your CV and don't make it a lengthy book sort of thing, right? 10 pages, 15 pages is not what we want to see. As we discussed at the inception, be it a CV, be it a resume that you are passing around, right? Always keep it concise. Number two, always ensure that it's clear, neat, and precise, right? We come across instances, my friends, where sometimes the first part of the CV uses Calibri, The second part uses Times New Roman. The third part uses Arial, right? Always stick to the same font. And also stick to the same font size wherever possible. Because sometimes we see at one place it's 11, the next part it's 12, the next part is 13 or 14 or 15. Always ensure that you keep to one font size. If you want your headings to be another size, that's completely understood. But the rest of the content, the majority of it, always ensure that it's in one size. Then font color, right? Don't use luminous colors, my friends. So sometimes, persons use bright reds, bright yellows, bright greens in the CV, and soon as we open that CV, we go blind, right? Because there's a huge contrast and, it's very difficult to read. So always choose soothing colors when you are doing your CV. Follow a logical sequence. We spoke about this, my friends, where everything needs to be in order. So your contact details can't be at the end. Your picture can't be in the middle. Your content can't be right at the top. So always ensure you follow the logical sequence that we spoke about. Tailor CV to the requirement. We spoke about this as well. Always ensure that you show that you have put in some sort of effort for applying to the job as well, right? So that is something to do. Make it unique and memorable in the best ways, not in the bad ways, my friends. So as said, don't use luminous colors, don't use colors which are contrasting quite a lot, because certain colors don't go hand in hand. Let's say in a black background, you use a deep, not a deep, but then again, a very shiny red. It's very hard on the eyes. If you are to use a blue in a black background, once again, it's not easy. So be very conscious of the colors that you're looking at and, include. Proper use of vocabulary and grammar. We understand, English is not basically the first language, right? And we come from a background where, speaking Sinhalese, and Sinhalese is our first language, and English happens to be our second. But in this modern age and time, when you are applying for a company in Sri Lanka, when you're applying for a company outside of the country, it's very, very important that your vocabulary and grammar is on point. And if you're not confident about it, please use these AI tools to make these changes accordingly. Use it for the best reason. AI, should not be used to, probably, do up your assignments, etc. That's not how you should use AI. AI should be used to aid you in the right places. So if you do, if you have any problems with your vocabulary, grammar, etc., use AI to help you solve these matters out. Then we come to social profiles. This is a very sensitive topic, my friends, because sometimes we've seen instances where persons lose their jobs or their opportunity to get a job, especially because, of things which are outside of their relevance as well. So how can I put this into an example? Let's say the presidential election is right around the corner. And let's say you have three presidential candidates called A, B, and C. Let's say you support A, and let's say you do not like B, and let's say you do not like C. So let's say on social media like Facebook to Instagram to etc., your profile is public, and you keep scolding either B or C just because you don't like them, and you try to push a lot of content about A just because you like that person. And in an instance like that, let's say you apply to a company and the company gets hold of your CV and they see what your name is, and they go on to just search your name on Facebook or any social platform for that matter, and they see everything, that you have scolded and etc. They see all that history. And let's say in a worst case, that the person evaluating you for that job happens to support B, where you have now scolded B. There might be instances, right, where there might be triggered bias because of that. So it's very, very, very important that you keep your social profiles private, especially Facebook, Instagram, I don't know, the other platforms that you use. Keep it private, right? And only ensure that you post or, send out information about things that are relevant to you and that do not trigger people in any sort of way. Right. Then we come to the file name that you need to put or include when you are saving your scene. we've come across instances where the CV sometimes that's sent to us has a very long name. Now, for example, let's say if we were to take my name, let's say CV dash Aisha, it would say CV dash Aishan, updated final copy one, final copy V2, V5, vetted by so and so, updated final copy 10 to etc. It's true that you might be having a lot of copies like that. But when you come to the finalized copy, my friends, always ensure, right, that you save the final document in a simple way, like CV-Aisha. And that you save it as a PDF, especially because, with, the modern age and time, we now do not use, companies do not use email addresses to get CVs. We use something called an ATS, application tracking system. So that's basically the, let's say, the name that we call for these systems. So there are different brands that create different ATSs. So all these ATSs would appreciate CVs being accepted as PDFs. And that is because, when we view your CV as a PDF on these ATSs, it will always remain as how you prepared it to be. If it's a Word file, there might be instances where the file might get corrupted and we might see your picture in one place, your name in another place, etc. So please keep that in mind. Do not apply for all vacancies, very straightforward. Stay away from copying the same CV format from your friends. So just because your best friend has that does not mean that you need to have the same. Do not include your salary expectation right at the top of the CV. Bad mistake. I've come across this from several persons where they say, I want an X amount as my salary. Anything short of that, I would not even set foot to your company, right? So it's very important that you do not include things as such. Apply early. Do not wait for the last minute thinking that you look here, this vacancy is going to close in 2 days. I will apply on the second day. Do not wait like that. Research about the company. Any company you apply for, my friends, always research about the company, know where you're applying to, and just know what the company is doing as a whole, right? Avoid lying and providing false information. I think these are very serious crime, my friends. If any company feels like at any given point that this what you have presented in your CV is not falling in line with what you're saying, it's a bad mistake to make. So always avoid lying and providing false information in your CV. Build a relevant personal brand to carry more weight, especially if you have a good following based on LinkedIn and you're promoting thought leadership, etc. Not right now, but in the forward years, that might support you more than your CV, because that will tell the story in a better way to the persons rather than your CV. So the best example I can give you is when I now go and meet persons, they know me for what I put on LinkedIn rather than them knowing for what that is there on my CV. So things like that. Then, when mentioning achievements, always support with quantitative data. So let's say you say that you increased efficiency. Once again, this is not for now, but for later. Let's say you manage a team and you say that you increased efficiency, right? In an instance like that, always ensure that you support what you say with data. So let's say if you say that you increased efficiency, then you need to say we achieved efficiency, sorry, we increased efficiency by 10% or by 20%, by 30%, so that it supports with quantitative data. So this is an example of a good CV format, my friends. So just for a matter of showing, you see a decent picture, you see her name bolded, and you see her experience, contact numbers, you see the expertise or the tools that she has put. She has not created her own self. There are languages put, referees are there. So this is an example of a good CV format. Right. So we are at the very tail end, the last slide, my friends, right? So this is basically information that I took off, a company. This shows the amount of CVs that we got as a company, right? So for MIT during the last 11 months of this year, we have received 15,576 CVs, quite a number of CVs, right? And then from all that, right, for the entire year, from the 15,576, we have only hired just 99 people, right? Very interesting to see how how these funnels work, right? Especially if you're coming from a background of numbers, right? So you might see a 43% that is being marked in red in this diagram, right? So from the 15,576 CVs that we got, we only shortlisted 6,770 CVs looking at their CV. So as said, this is why CV writing is very, very, very important, because just by looking at your CV is what we shortlist on, right? So if you see the conversion rate, only 43% made it. The others were rejected. And this was solely by us just looking at your CV, because that is the first interference of you with our company, right? So this is why CV is very, 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 very important, right? Then thereupon, you see this going from 6,770 to 519. This is based on the telephone screening we do to etc. So I'm not going to go through the entire, funnel. But then again, just know that from the initial shortlisted of 6,770 just by looking at your CV to hiring 99 people, only 1.4% made the cut, right? So this is why simple things that we just look past, like the CV, like the phone screening, like the LinkedIn profile, is very, very important, so that you make the cut of you landing a job. So with that, I will let you know some industry rates as well. So if you apply for a company and you don't hear back in 7 days, just make up your mind that it's not going to happen for the most part. Look elsewhere, start applying. Do not apply for one job and wait until you get that. Always, always keep applying until you get a job, because it's very, very, very tough to secure a job these days, right? And with that said, I will once again leave you with a quote which says, skills and storytelling is the currency that will transact you with the employer. If you are skilled, if you have done your CV right, if you have done everything right in life, and you are very skillful, and you can really convey that as well in by means of communication, etc., that will always land you the job, right? So with that, my friends, I leave you. So any questions up next, I'm free to take as well. So I'll leave it up to the organizing committee to take it from here. Thank you so much, guys.
Yes, Mr. Aisha. Yeah, it was a very grateful session and a very knowledgeable session. So first of all, I want to say thank you so much for it. So before to wind up, there are some set of questions students want to clarify from you. So I will shoot one by one for you. So you can give me a comment or a clear answer for it, right?
Sure,
Sure.
absolutely.
Yeah. First one, if we don't have a formal job experience, what we can put under the experience session? Actually, they want to know, is it okay to put our volunteering roles and university projects out in under our experience, or else do we can cut off the experience session and start from the education qualification?
Answering this question, right? Work experience is definitely not something that you might be having, right, when you are applying for your first job. So this is why I happen to mention that, it's very, very crucial that you include basically, the academics you have done, the sports, the societies, the clubs, and etc. that you have been a part of. But by chance, if you have any sort of volunteering experience, right, just cut out the work experience part, put it as volunteering experience as the subheading, and include that in your CV. It's a definite must. Please do that. But majority of the persons who I come across in this modern age and time do not have the volunteering experience as well. So if you do not have that, basically you can cut the work experience, you cannot include the volunteering experience as well, and then just go upon with your academic qualifications, etc. So once again, to recap, if you have any volunteering experience, put it as volunteering experience and include that. If you do not have that as well as work experience, just go about with your academic qualifications.
Yeah, Mr. Aisha. The second one is how we can make our CV stand out of recruiters. Actually, they want to know what are the tips and unique points we need to highlight in our CV. I think this is the best question for you because you are a talent acquisition manager. So what is the
Yes.
suggestion?
Okay, right. So Heshan, in terms of this question, I think this is what we covered as well in the last 1 hour so that we spoke of. It's always about you having done all the background work. So act consciously, guys. When you are at university, just don't waste time. Just don't waste time coming for lectures and then, just going home. Always be present at lectures, learn well, and likewise be out there, be part of clubs, be parts of societies. And if you have the opportunity to become your be part of, other volunteering bodies. Now, for example, I've come across, universities that offer IEEE to Rotaract to different sorts of bodies all over as well. So if those are there, please take part, because if you have done all that and you include that in your CV and you are very good at communicating that in your CV as well, you'll always find the job, because that is what will basically transact you with job opportunity. Right. So always ensure to make sure that you make your CV stand out, that you have done the background work. So at the point of you creating the CV, you thinking, look here, oh no, I haven't done anything to etc. That's the bad point to start with, and to try to make a standout CV, especially when you don't have the base for it. So this is why it's very important when you are at uni, before you come to the level where you need to make your CV to etc, keep doing all this so that you feel comfortable saying that I have all this to include in my CV, and this will make me get the job that I want.
Yeah, Mr. Aishan, actually, it was awesome. So, and another one is, do we need to add engaging summary or a personal statement to our CV?
Right. So I think we spoke about the summary part. I think especially at the very inception of this session, about not just putting my vision is as such. Sorry, my aim is to support the vision or the mission of the company to etc. That's not something you want to put, but rather you can put a small sentence covering information that is more comprehensive and that's more about you. But if your question, Hishan, I believe your question is something else worded in another way. If you are asking about whether to include a cover letter, right? Cover letters are not included in this modern age and time, because we at MIT, we do not ask for any sort of cover letter from any of our applicants. And in any of the companies that I've been part of throughout my career, we have not, requested for cover letters. Cover letters is a thing of the past now. It's not required anymore.
Yeah, Mr. Aishan. And also the one last question, when we are putting our skills in our CV, is it necessary to divide into two as a soft skill and a hard skill, or is it not mandatory things to do?
Right. It's not mandatory. As long as you can leave it as skills, but ensure you don't mix it. For example, let's say if you were to write several positive numbers and negative numbers, and if you were to just list it down, any logical way of thinking would be where you just put the positive numbers first and then you put the negative numbers, right? If you were just given, a set of letters, from A to Z, you will always order those in a way where it will follow the alphabetical pattern. Likewise, you can always put either the hardcore skills at the top and then your soft skills. If not, you can put your soft skills and then the hardcore skills. But then again, do not mix it and make it more or less like a fruit salad. But then again, always ensure that you segregate it internally, even though you do not show it separately. So you can put it as skills and you can just list them down.
Yeah, Mr. Aishan. So that's it. So once
Sure.
again, thank you so much for the session. Actually, it was a very grateful session and very knowledgeable session. So looking
Um,
forward to work with you. So once again, thank you so much and have a good night.
Thank you so much, Hashan. So if anyone has any questions, they can reach out to me on LinkedIn as well. I just put in the link, so anyone can reach out to me anytime and I can answer for them. Thank you so much for having me, Hashan. Appreciate it. Thank you so much, guys. Have a good day. Take care. Good night. Bye-bye.